Today is Saturday. It's February the 18th, 2023. I'm happy to come to you today with today's devotional from Heart of a Shepherd. Our title is Beautiful Dreamer. Now, our scripture reading, continuing our chronological study of the scriptures, is Genesis chapter 37. Well, Genesis 37 brings us to a new crossroads in the scripture, and you're going to notice that the focus will shift from Jacob, now known as Israel, to his son Joseph. Now, Joseph is truly one of the Old Testament's most honorable and upright men. Now, a key detail to understanding the dynamics in this period of Joseph's life is remembering that his mother had recently died, giving birth to his brother, the 12th son of Jacob, named Benjamin. Now, that was found in Genesis 35, verses 16 through 19. Now, recalling that Jacob's favorite wife, his first love, helps us appreciate the tragic events in Genesis 37. Now, being reminded that Jacob was a shepherd, a sojourner, and so he was, in Genesis 37 and verse 1, a stranger, a foreigner, an alien in the land of Canaan. Now, the Lord had promised Jacob, his father Isaac, and his grandfather Abraham, that the land of Canaan would be an inheritance for his lineage in Genesis chapter 12. However, the possession of the land would not come to fruition until Israel returned from 400 years of slavery in Egypt and conquered and possessed the land. Well, Joseph was 17 years old and was tending sheep with his half-brothers, the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, and Jacob's concubines, who had each borne him 2 sons, chapter 37 and verse 2. And we're not told what prompted Joseph to go to his father and, quote, deliver an evil report concerning his brothers. Still, I feel there is a good reason to believe that jealousy might have prompted his brothers to treat Joseph with disdain. And growing up in a household we would describe in our days as a blended home, a home with 4 different mothers and 12 sons now, and one mother having died. There was constant strife and contention between Joseph and his brothers. Now, his mother's recent death had no doubt left him vulnerable, and his father favoring him with and I quote, a coat of many collars, most likely a long-sleeved tunic. It indicated Joseph's favorite status or stature in Jacob's home in verse 3. Now, we read in verse 4 that when Joseph's brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, we read they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. Now, in verses 5 through 11, you're going to notice that in the providence of the plan of God, the Lord prophetically revealed to Joseph in 2 dreams that he would one day have a position of authority in his brothers' lives, or we might say over his brothers, and they would in that day bow before him. Unfortunately, however, and unwisely in my opinion, in verse 11, Joseph decided to share the prophetic nature of his dreams with his brothers, and we read, of course, they envied him. Well, a fateful day came when Joseph was bidden by his father Jacob to leave the safety of his home and inspect his brothers' welfare and the flocks they tended, verses 12 through 14. And so we read that Joseph traveled from his home in Hebron to Shechem. Now that is a distance of about 40 miles, and it is infamous in our study. If you remember, it was in Shechem where Simeon and Levi had slain the men of that city after their sister Dinah had been raped. Well, Joseph arrived in Shechem, but learned his brothers had moved on to Dothan, chapter 37, verse 50 through 17. Now, that was a town 100 miles from home and on a main trade route to Egypt. Perhaps recognizing Joseph's coat of many colors from a distance, the brothers conspired. First, they would kill him, verses 18 through 20. And finally, Reuben, the eldest brother, intervened and convinced his brothers to place Joseph in a pit. Now, we read in verse 21, he had planned to return later to free his brother. Now, the brothers then stripped Joseph of his coat of many colors, his tunic. And we read in verse 24 that they cast him into a pit. Well, when they spied the approach of Midianite merchantmen traveling to Egypt, they, in Reuben's absence, sold Joseph as an enslaved person, as a slave, for 20 pieces of silver. Then we read that Joseph was taken to Egypt, sold to, and I'm going to quote now, Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, and a captain of the guard. He was the head of the prison in Egypt, if you would, for Pharaoh. Now, tragically, and adding to their grievous sins, Joseph's brothers determined to deceive their father. They convinced him that a wild beast had killed Joseph, and they dipped his coat of many colors into the blood of a goat. Well, when Jacob saw the frayed condition of Joseph's coat covered in blood, he believed his son was dead. We read in verses 34 and 35, in an act of utter grief, Jacob rent his clothes and he put sackcloth upon his loins, and he mourned for his son, we read, many days, and said, verse 35, I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Well, consider this in a closing thought. Providentially, we have now the stage set for Joseph to one day, providentially of God, deliver his brothers, Jacob's household, from famine and fulfill his dream. For he will stand over them, his brothers, as they bow before him. I want to invite you to subscribe not only to this YouTube channel, this Heart of a Shepherd Inc., if you would, but also why don't you subscribe to heartofashepherd.com and receive these daily devotionals in your email box, along with some questions to ponder. And I invite you to do that. God bless you. Have a great day. And thank you for joining me as we continue the chronological study of the Scriptures from Heart of a Shepherd. God bless, and bye-bye.